peculiar. I don't think they know what they're doing half the time. So all these things are far too complicated. I mean, it's all very well when it works, but it's pretty disastrous when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okie doke. Now then, if I switch off that, that's it. Okay, done. Hodu Lashem Tov. Right, got it. All right, well, everybody, thanks for turning up. Lovely. We've got a lovely, lovely shiur today. Really lovely. Bezras Hashem. So let's start off with our tefillah. Okay. Oh, I have to share it first, don't I? Sorry. Share screen. That's it. Done. Good. Lovely. Okay. Ribon olamim v'Adonai Adonim, Ava Haman v'Slichot. Modim anachnu lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'lei avotenu. B'kida b'shtachavaya, shekaraftonu letoratcha u'lavadotcha v'dat kodesh. ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו מחיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחול ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לבינך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולבבך. תקשיב אוזנך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הראל בסודות תורתך, ויהיה לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך קרח ניחוח, ותציל עלינו, אור מקור נשמתנו ובחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבודך הקדושים, אשר עליהם גלית את דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם, וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבל ניכשל בדברים אלו, ובזכותם יראיננו במה שאנו לומדים, כמאמר נעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לרצון מפי, ויגון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגורלי. Amen. Can he rtzon? Okay, so today we've got a really exciting letter in my view. It's one of these sort of, life-changing letters that Rabbi Ashlag wrote to his students. Okay, so we're going to have Bezrat Hashem an opportunity to learn this. Let's get that up on the screen. Now I need to do the sharing bit. Where's it gone? Show windows. I can't find it now. This is crazy. Oh, I found it. Okay. That's one we want. Share. Right. I'm not sure how much we'll get done today, but whatever we manage is worth it because it's really one of these incredible letters. So we're going to have a look at it, okay? And it was written Erev Shabbos Kodesh in Warsaw, and I'm pretty sure that was something like 1926. Okay, it's one of the early letters that Rabbi Ashlag wrote. And he's writing to his students. His students are still in Eretz Israel, and he's gone back to Poland because when they came on Aliyah, I think it was about 1921, unfortunately, they didn't have enough money to be able to bring all the children with. And so they had to, just leave some behind. And he's gone back to pick up the children and also to meet the Rabbi of Porizov. And also at the same time, he went around yeshivas and tried to persuade people to come on Aliyah because he said that something dreadful was going to happen in Europe and they needed to come on Aliyah. Unfortunately, his words were not heeded. Okay, so this is the letter that we're going to be learning, and it's absolutely fascinating. Lichvod b'nei hayeshiva d'itur rabbanim Hashem alehem. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, so he's writing to his Talmidim. Etzta'er me'od al evorim hamedullalim. I'm very sorry about some of the limbs which aren't functioning. He's actually talking about some of the Talmidim, a few of the group. whose connection with the group of students wasn't so strong. And for external reasons, they were overcome for different things, by different things upset them, or they weren't able to continue with their group, and they were not joining with the other students. May God give them strength that they'll be able to connect with us, and may God be with them. ואני מבין שאינכם עוסקים כל כך בייחודים דמוך, דהיינו אמונה וליבה, דהיינו השפעה כחפצי. And I understand that you're not occupying yourselves enough with uniting the tikkun of the mind, which is instead of wanting to understand everything, but to go in faith. Now, why is it important to go in faith? Because faith is giving, all right? We have to give our faith. It's actually it is difficult to do, because opposing that is all the forces of rationality that we so much trust, okay? And we have to let go, and we have to go in faith, okay? And he's going to expand on that later on in the letter. And liba is the heart, okay? And the heart means letting go of your own desires and giving instead to the other one, whether you're giving to God, davening or saying a bracha or something, or giving to your fellow human being, all right? So he wants us to join mocha v'liba, going with your mind in faith and heart in giving. Nevertheless, do the best you can. And the salvation of God will be in the twinkling of an eye. And the most important thing that's standing today in front of you is the unification of the group. Okay, that everybody takes part and everybody is in unity together. All right. Now, unity doesn't mean they're all the same. In fact, if you read the biography of Rabbi Ashlag, you can find there's a section in there which deals with the students. Every single student was completely different. I mean, they had very strong personalities, and every one of them was different from the other. Okay, and their ways of serving God was different. Okay, so unity does not mean everybody the same. Unity means respecting each other and valuing each other's skills. So some of them, for example, would have been better at the emunah parts, better at the, working on faith. Others would have been more practical in the way of giving with their hearts. Okay. Either way, by joining together, you gain from each other's strengths. You learn from each other. Make as much effort in this as you can. Because there is sufficient within it which will deal with all our lacks. Now he's going into the main topic of the letter, and it's about the new Pharaoh, okay? The new king, okay? But he begins with a quotation from the Gemara. Talmid shegala megalin rabo imo. This is from the Gemara, which deals with the laws of somebody who's accidentally killed somebody, okay? And, for accidental manslaughter, there was, of course, the cities of refuge. And there was a rule that a Talmid who was exiled, his rabbi got exiled together with him. Perush, explanation. And this whole matter was extremely difficult for the sages. I mean, how could it be possible that a student, a true Talmid of a true rabbi, how could such a thing happen to him in the first place? That God forbid he killed a man by accident. Nobody's saying we murdered him, but to kill him by accident. How could such a terrible thing happen to a Talmid, a true Talmid, with a true rabbi? And this is what he says. עד כדי גירושו מלהסתפק בנחלת השם. Okay, how is it possible that such a thing could happen? וזאת אחר שהוא דבוק ברב אמיתי, even though he's already clinging to a true rabbi. Rav Gottlieb says, you can look at it as the rabbi, you can also look at it as God, okay? So, either way. On this, they said, they made the answer, because at the time when the student is not so strong in his service of God, or hear the way he relates to his rabbi, it also appears to him that the rabbi is not so great as he thought he was. Okay, he no longer rates his rabbi, he no longer, or he's not relating to God in the same way. Like when a person goes down in his service to God, he thinks, well, maybe God's not so great after all. That's what's going on in his mind. The Kevan, and since this sort of re-estimation, or the lowering of the estimation of the way he sees God or the way he sees his rabbi has happened, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that it really is the case. He's no longer able to learn from his rabbi. Only according to the measure that he estimates how, him in his heart. And if he doesn't estimate him as being worthwhile to learn from him anymore, then actually that's what actually happens, because his rabbi is no longer able to teach him. So he's no longer got a rabbi that's worth learning from. Okay, he actually, the Talmud can only receive according to how he values what he's receiving. Now we're the same, okay? We can value the Torah learning only to the extent that we value the source. We can value our connection with God only to the extent to how much we actually rate God as being the master of the universe and great in loving kindness. Otherwise, it's very difficult to listen to the Torah and the mitzvot. If we don't consider the greatness of God, then it's very hard for us to go in the way of giving and obeying the Torah and mitzvot. Okay. Since the student here is looking on his teacher in this sort of rather discounting manner, that's the form his rabbi takes in his eyes, which is exile. And he's actually only able to receive from his teacher according to the way he values him. Rabbi Gottlieb adds as a comment, Rabbi Ashlag is hinting here that the highest light is in a constant state, okay? Absolutely constant. There is no change in the quality of the light or in the quantity of the light. It's always constant. All the changes come only from the vessels, so it's from the way we receive the light, okay, and how we receive the light. So if the vessel, that's us, is in a low state and not valuing what we're receiving, then we also feel the world around us also is a corresponding lowly state. Now he goes into this whole concept of exile. Tchilat galut Mitzrayim, b'hashibud matchil ha'katuv, vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim, asher lo yada et Yosef. The beginning of the exile of Egypt and the servitude starts from the scripture. A new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. Perush, explanation. שנתגלתה שליטה חדשה של רצון לקבל במוחם של כל אחד ואחד. שליטה חדשה מקרוב. Rabbi Ashlag takes this as happening inside us, okay? Not outside. He's not taking it as the historical events of what happened in Egypt, all right? He's talking about the Egypt that we get into, the narrow states of consciousness that we get into, the slavery to our own will to receive for ourselves alone that we fall into, and then we're exiled from our own self, we're exiled from our own soul. Okay, so he says, how do we fall into this? How does it happen? And he says, "Vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim shelo yadat Yosef." A new king arises over Egypt, all right, who did not know Joseph. What does it mean? It means that they manifested a new governance in their minds of each one. What was the governance? The governance that the will to receive is governing, okay, instead of the will to give. The will to give is in consonance with Hashem, in infinitive form with God. The will to receive for ourselves alone is not, okay. The way of Torah and mitzvot is in infinitive form. We're doing it for the sake of giving. The will to receive for ourselves alone, which is our egoism, is the opposite. So he says, a new governance has arisen, okay, in the mind of every single one. Shlita chadasha mikorov, a new governance. So what happens is, well, let's talk it, if we use historical, all right, it's easier, and then we apply it to ourselves, okay? So the children of Israel fell from their previous spiritual level, okay, as, for example, that we had in the example above, that the Talmud who is exiled, his rabbis are exiled with him, okay? In other words, they began no longer to value Joseph. Mimela lo yadu et Yosef. They didn't rate Joseph anymore, all right? Now, I think it's Rashi, says that the children of Israel were actually enslaved in Egypt from the time of the death of Joseph until the end, okay? 200 and something years, I've forgotten the number, all right? Not 400, okay? It was 200 and something, okay? And so it's counted from the death of Joseph. What Rabbi Ashlag is saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be the actual death of Joseph. It was the death of Joseph's influence in their hearts. So long as they still rated him highly and his teachings as the great tzaddik that he really was, okay, they were not enslaved, okay? But when they began to consider, you know, he wasn't anybody so special after all, okay, especially where they were living, that they had all the technology of the modern Egypt that they had there, okay? So they rated that, okay? What happened was, they began to only attain him according to the measure that they felt in their heart, which was not great, okay? What actually happens? They began to imagine that Joseph was like them themselves. Okay, sound familiar? How much do we project onto God and imagine God is somehow or other like ourselves? Okay, it's a big issue, this. Do we imagine God as being something like ourselves? Often we do, and then we don't have faith. Okay, and we don't rate and we don't value because God, we need to value God as being much higher than ourselves, okay? That he is the root of all and great in loving kindness, okay? And we don't. We somehow or other project him in on our own image to him, okay? And then it's hard for us to serve him. So similar thing here. They no longer valued the influence of Joseph over them. The kevan shekain, and since that was the case, lo yadu it yourself. They were no longer connected with him. V'itchila shibud, and the slavery began. She'im lo kain, because if that was not the case, v'dai hayat tzaddik magen aleihim, then of course the tzaddik would have protected them. V'lo hayta mitzuyot lahem klal b'chinat galut v'shibud, and it would not have been possible at all, the whole aspect of slavery. It's a fascinating idea, huh? In other words, it wasn't the wicked Pharaoh, it was the lack of faith in the tzaddik. The wicked Pharaoh couldn't have done anything if they'd maintained their faith in the tzaddik, or also for us, the wicked Pharaoh. Who's the wicked Pharaoh? Our will to receive for ourselves alone. The Pharaoh within us is the one who says, Mi Hashem eshesh ma b'kolo. Who is God that I should listen to his voice? Okay, that he actually says that in the Torah. Okay, who is God that I should listen to his voice? Do you see where Rabbi Ashlag is taking this idea? Okay, he says if we don't value God, okay, and this is called emunah b'romamut Hashem, faith in the exaltation of God, in that God is great, okay, that he's the Einod Milvado, there's none other than him, okay, then we say within ourselves, who is God that I should listen to his voice? That's the voice of Pharaoh. Okay, absolutely, that's the voice of Pharaoh. Okay, so it's the lack of belief in the greatness of God allows the Pharaoh to spring up within us. All right, that's the whole problem that he's saying here. And then we get the whole problem of galut, separation from God, exile from ourselves, v'shibud, and slavery to our wills to receive for ourselves alone. Because Pharaoh is sort of the ultimate archetype of the will to receive for ourselves alone. Rav Gottlieb writes here, if they were able to go away of faith and say, well, they've got eyes, but they don't see. In other words, if they were able, even though that if they didn't rate Yosef, okay, they didn't value Yosef as they should, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, Tolimit Hashama Batzmam, nevertheless, they felt that they themselves were to blame, okay? In other words, they were to believe that Joseph, from his own side, was exalted and lofty and a great tzaddik, then they would still have been able to receive light from Joseph, and that would still have shielded them. Okay. But even if they were making the effort and weren't able to do this, then they are definitely going to fall into exile and servitude. Okay. And the reason why this is about, why does this come about, is that we actually need to come to a place where if we can't function in the positive, we actually have to go down to the negative to actually discover the wills to receive for ourselves alone, which is called Giloi Hakarat Hara, revelation of the evil within us, okay? And that is another way that which we can come to redemption, because it's when we recognize the evil within us, we actually develop the vessels. What actually happens is that we get so fed up with it and so upset with it that we ask for redemption. We ask we asked for being saved. So Hakarat Hara means that we actually recognize the negative, and it opens us to prayer. Okay, great. Now, before I go on, is there any questions? You guys all there? All right. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So it's explicit Like the Torah tells us explicitly, what were they working with? This is Homer ubilveinim. Okay, Homer was the clay, and the bilveinim was the leveinim was the bricks. Okay, they had to get the clay, and they had to get the bricks. All right. So Rabbi Ashlag here is going to play a little bit on the words. Okay. That is explicit in the Torah that the work that they had to do was with the clay and the bricks. Now, chomer, okay, is the inner meaning of avon hachamur, the serious sin, which is the only sin on which we're judged on the thought, okay, is avodah zarah, is idol worship. All other sins, okay, if somebody, supposing, for example, somebody gets an idea, wants to steal something, unless he actually goes and steals it, he's okay. I mean, you know, unless he actually does the action, he's not chayav. He's not punished for the thought. The only time we're punished for the actual thought is when it's avodah zarah. So in what way does avodah zarah count in? So avodah zarah is serving something other than God. Well, if a person is serving his will to receive instead of serving the Creator, okay, that's the chomer. All right, that's the aspect their service was with the chomer, with the avodah zarah, which was serving their will to receive, okay, instead of serving the Creator. Bilveinim, the bricks, okay, from the word lavan, okay, white, sort of tshuva, is the inner meaning of tshuva. That each time they would fall into this cycle of falling into their will to receive themselves alone, and then doing tshuva, okay, and they got mercy for the time being, and they attained for the moment the highest light, not from their own zuchut, okay, but because of faith in the Holy Fathers. And they were whitened from their iniquities. But this didn't last. Why? Because they weren't actually managing to do tshuva from their own side. They were doing it because they believed in the tradition of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, but not because they themselves were actually doing the work of changing. Okay, that's why it didn't last. And they would go forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards. All right, so sometimes they would be able to serve God, and sometimes they weren't able to serve God, and sometimes they were involved with their will to receive themselves alone, and sometimes they're able to get out of it, but it was never lasting. Okay, so they're going forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, and this is B'kol Avodah B'Sadeh. Okay, and this is all the work in the field. What field? The field of human consciousness. So Rav Ashlag relates this to the continuation of this really trying to serve God, and it was working and not working, which relates to all the other mitzvot, but not the one of avodah zarah, which is the will to receive itself alone. As the sages said, Beinonim zeh v'zeh shoftan. The Beinoni, okay, goes forwards and backwards. All right, the one in the middle. You've got the tzaddik is straight for life. The rasha is straight for death. The Beinoni is like goes backwards and forwards. All right, till he finally gets it. Okay, so they were like being tossed around by their wills to receive, and then they'd feel sorry, and then do tshuva again, and then they get connected with the will to give, and then they'd slip back into the will to receive for themselves again, and that was how it would go on. And therefore, this klipa is called by the name of paro. Okay, there's lots of different explanations for the name paro. Okay, there's more than one. Here he says that this relates to the letters pe, ra. Okay, if you were to rearrange those, you'd get paro. All right, pera. What's pera? Bad mouth. Now, it's not a bad mouth in the way that we think about a bad mouth. All right, we're going to find out what he means by it. All right. Now, if you were going to map the sfirot onto the face, okay, you would get that the malchut is the mouth. So just very quickly, you've got the crown or the skull is keter, the eyes are chokhmah, the ears are bina, the nose is tiferet, and the malchut, and the mouth is malchut. Okay? All right, so that's one way of describing the sfirot. So here he says malchut in the mochin is called peh, is the mouth. She sodohu, whose inner meaning is bechinat hachra'ah v'haskama, is that he decides and makes an absolute decision that he's going to serve God. That he's not going to change his mind. He's not going to make his word chulin. He's going to keep his word. And everything that comes out of his mouth, that's what he's going to do. Okay? If he decides to throw away all his own idol worship, okay, and here he's talking about it as the will to receive for himself alone, and to go only after God, then he does it in practice, and he sticks to what he decided. But in the exile of Egypt, there was a governance of the evil mouth. What does it mean? The bad malchut. I know that it didn't work. That is, it didn't work like that. It wasn't that everything that came out of his mouth he was able to do. And I would say what came out of his mouth was one reality, and what he actually managed to do was completely different reality. And they weren't able to keep their word. They kept going back to their wills to receive themselves alone, okay, to the slavery. All right. So in other words, the problem with the Pharaoh isn't that he doesn't allow us any light at all. Okay, that's not what the klipa of Pharaoh is. The klipa of Pharaoh is much more subtle than that. The klipa of Pharaoh is that he does allow us light. Okay, he allows us to imagine that we can do the work of serving God, and he gives us satisfaction from that we can think about it and we can imagine it. Okay, but another arrangement of the word Pharaoh is oref, the neck. Okay, so what happens is he actually blocks the action. Okay, we actually want to serve God. We want to bring it out into practice. We want to let go of our will to receive for ourselves alone, and then we're blocked at the neck. Okay, the Pharaoh stops us, so that we cannot bring forth the light that we gain into action. That's the Pharaoh. All right. And what do we find? That what we come out of our mouth, whatever we decide, is one reality, and the doing is another reality. And they kept going back to their wrongdoing. Therefore, even though they did merit some illumination, which was high, and it came from the other sfirot, okay, they couldn't actually bring it into the actuality of doing it in practice. Okay. In other words, each time they were faced with the actual will to receive themselves alone, they kept choosing the will to receive themselves alone instead of God. Okay. Sounds familiar? Okay. This is where it comes from. Because the the will to receive for itself alone, which is this particular klipa, which is the opposite of the malchut of holiness, which makes a decision it's going to serve God and actually keeps to it, okay, is the oref, like I said, it's the neck, which stops the light coming down from the head. Says, and it actually sucks away and takes away all the light which had started to come down for Israel. Okay. This is the inner meaning, what the sages tell us, that in fact no slave was ever able to get out of Egypt. All right, no slave was ever able to run away. I mean, you wonder why not. I mean, the Sinai desert's a bit of a desert, I agree, but it's not so big. Okay, and I'm sure there were paths across it, and I'm sure that a band of slaves, if they wanted to, could sort of nip off and slip away and cross the desert. Okay, and we know there were a few oases on the way. All right, why didn't they? Because we're not talking about a historical event, number one. We're talking about a consciousness. All right. And what is the consciousness? That Pharaoh did a great witchcraft on the entrances or the exits of Egypt, as the sages said. What is this witchcraft? Shlitat ratzon lekabel, the governance of the will to receive. And what Rabbi Ashlag wants to say, that it was such a strong governance, it is such a strong governance, okay, that nobody is able to escape from it once we're in its power. Mashma, what is it? A person wants to get out of its demands, out of its governance of him. He's fed up with it. He wants to get out of it. Okay. And he tries everything he possibly can to get out of this governance. But he can't. And this witchcraft is on the gateways away from Egypt, okay, which is the gateway of the will to do tshuva. How do we know this? It's from saying the sages, Pitchuli petach kuchudo shamachat. Okay, open for me a doorway which is just like the point of a needle, and I will open to you, great big carriageways for wagons to go along. And this is what we see in the text. Okay, and I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go, and not without a strong hand. God tells the children of Israel through Moses, his servant. Who's Moses? The aspect of faith within the human being. That no matter the strength of will and the powers in the world, will not help against this evil klipa, which is the worst of them all, because it doesn't give in except before God in his glory himself. This is the inner meaning of what we say on the Haggadah of Pesach. I am not a messenger. In other words, when we find ourselves stuck with our will to receive ourselves alone, what's the answer? You've got to put your trust in God, and you've got to pray to him and ask him to get you out. And that's what it, that's what it means when it says that their cry went up to God. Until they cried to God to get them out, nothing happened. Okay? You actually have to cry out to God. You have to ask him to help you. Now, it's a funny thing because the will to receive himself alone, not very good at that either. When we're in the grip of the will to receive himself alone, prayer is extraordinarily difficult. Okay? Why is that? Because the will to receive himself alone knows that that's its end. That's its end. It knows the moment we give a genuine prayer, we want to get out of its clutches, that's its end. And so therefore, it tries very hard that we don't give a prayer. It'll distract us in all sorts of ways and try to block us off from our own souls so that we don't pray. Okay? But because it's only this bad klipa, the one which stops us doing what we know to be right. Okay? So we've got the knowledge, but we can't bring it through into action. All right? The only thing that helps is Hashem Yitbarach b'kvodo v'atzmo. Jesod ani v'lo shaliach. V'zesod shalachti et yadi v'hiketi b'Mitzrayim. And this is also the inner meaning of I stretched out my hand and I smote the Egyptians. V'natati et chen ha'am hazeh b'nei Mitzrayim. And I gave the grace of this people in the eyes of the Egyptians. Ad shishluchu et Adam Yisrael batzmam, until they let the Adam, the aspect of ourselves who's looking for God, Adameh le'elyon, the one who wants to be like God, till they let him go. Till our will to receive ourselves alone lets it go. Ve'emunah hi b'shtayim, and the faith needs to be in two aspects. Aleph, shadam lo yachol la'azor la'atzmo b'kochotav. A person can't help himself with his own efforts. Ki b'kol pam shadam nichshal matziah lo haguf sheyesh od tachbula she'od lo nisa v'tolei b'tachbula. And what actually happens is that each time we try something and we fall down, so the ego just sort of tells it, well, try something else. And it gives you another tactic to try, which he hasn't yet tried. And he puts all his hopes on that tactic. So that's one problem. Okay. And two, and we need to believe that the Holy Blessed One is able to help and wants to help. So what I meant to say is that we discover that relying on tactics doesn't work, and we have to have faith in God, because faith will overcome any tactic. All right. So the second thing is that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is able to help and wants to help. Okay. And even if with our eyes of our rational eyes, it doesn't look like that. Okay. We have to believe that that is so. And the issue of the help which comes via the Shaliach, okay, is because we think that there's still some other tactic that we can try that can help us. But when we finally try everything and we find that there's nothing else, we discover there's no other messenger can help us, not diet, not psychotherapy, not exercise, whatever it is we think we can manage with, okay? Ultimately, it has to be God. Sometimes, Rav Gottlieb points out, it does seem to us that we're able to receive help from a shaliach, for example, from a friend or from a rabbi or from, I don't know, from some tactic or the other. All right. But he brings the prayer that we say when we open the ark on Shabbos, okay? Lo alenosh v'chitzna. I'm not going to trust in any human being. V'lo ba'al bar Elohim samichno. I'm not going to trust even on a son of God. What's a son of God? It means like a Rebbe. Ela be'elohad shmaya, but owning God in heaven alone. Okay. And he asked a question. I've got to ask an interesting question here. Surely the foundation of Hasidut is the community, the group which surrounds the Rebbe. Okay. That he gets help from his friends, he gets help from his Rebbe. And also in this letter, it's written, if we can be connected with the true Rav, okay, then we don't need to go into exile. And we're Berich Shemaim from the prayer that reads when we open the ark, Lichora Katuv Loken, and it seems to be written the opposite. But he says the explanation is really quite simple, all right? Even when we get an enlightenment through a friend, or from the aspect of Yosef, which is the Rav, okay, or from any other way, we need to know that this is actually the Creator who's simply coming dressed in garments. And we need to be clinging to the wearer of the garment and not to the garments he's wearing, okay? In other words, we shouldn't mix up the wearer of the garment, which is God, and the guise he comes in, all right? Then we can't get the help from the guys, but because there's no other power in the world beside him. And so a person always needs to trust in God and not in the disguises that he uses. And God can choose to send him help, but through one guise or another. And not this one, it could be another way. Okay, but we need to always relate the help as coming through God. Okay. ועתה בא נבוא לפרש לכם בעזרת השם יתברך בשורת הגאולה ושליחות משה. Now, I don't think we're going to manage the whole of the letter, but we'll do a little bit, all right, a bit more. We've only got 5 minutes. We'll do what we can. Now we will come to explain to you, with the help of God, the tidings of redemption and Moses's what do you say? Shlichut, role. Okay? And it's written, Vayal Moshe v'yomer, v'hein lo yaminu li. And Moses answered, this was in the burning bush, when God appeared to him in the burning bush. And Moses answered, he said, well, listen, they're not going to believe me. Ki yomru lo nireh lech Hashem. They'll say, well, God didn't appear to you. Perush. Explanation. De kevan she since Moses knew that the Malchut, okay, we said that the mouth of the Malchut in Kedusha is in exile, the issue of giving, okay, is in exile, because as we've seen, it didn't bring any fruit at that point. And in the meaning of ki kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi, that I'm heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. Okay. Therefore, Moses, who was the faithful shepherd, maintains before God, they won't believe me, because even if I connect Israel, my people, with Israel, and I bring them the aspect of giving, the problem is that they are sunk under the klipa of Pharaoh. Okay, and we've said there's no other way to get them out of this. Okay, and Pharaoh is sucking away and destroying the aspect of them able to believe in me. Okay. And any aspect that Moses says he's able to show them will actually just get swallowed up by the will to receive oneself alone. Oh, Mr. Page, sorry. Okay. And increases even more the aspect of receiving, because now they're not just receiving physical in the physical aspect, they're also receiving in the spiritual aspect. So even though they want to join with me, they won't be able to listen to my voice, okay, because they're still under the aspect of the governance of the klipa of Pharaoh. Nevertheless, the same issue as with Joseph. If they were able to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu, as is fitting, okay, to believe that his bechina, his aspect, which is the aspect of faith, which is the aspect of above knowledge, okay, which is giving, is actually got a greater power than the governance of Pharaoh on them, which is reality, then the children of Israel would have been able to listen to the voice of Moses, because he is above the malchut, he's above the knowledge of the body or the ego. But if they were to strengthen themselves with this knowledge that they were able to use faith, okay, then they would have been saved from the klipa of Pharaoh, through the power of faith. Ki klipat Pharaoh, because the aspect of Pharaoh is not able to govern in the conscious space of faith, only in the conscious space of rationale and knowledge. Okay. And this is what Moses complained to God. And he says, they might say to me, God didn't appear to you. And this is because of the problem that they are under the influence of the will to receive for ourselves alone. And so we are too. When we are under the influence of the will to receive for ourselves alone, it's amazing how narrow, to what narrow borders our inner world contracts. Okay. And we'll say, oh, we can't see any way out. We can't see any possibility of solution. We can't see any possibility of redemption. Okay. We won't believe that there's a possibility of redemption. We won't believe there's a possibility of getting out of whatever mess we happen to be in. Okay. That's the problem. We won't believe. Why won't we believe? Because we're under the influence of the will to receive for ourselves alone. This is what Moses pointed out to God, okay? And he says, they'll say, nobody appeared to, God didn't appear to you. And this is because of Vayakom Melech Hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef, because of the inner klipa of the will to receive for ourselves alone, which doesn't recognize the power of the tzaddik. Because when they get really involved with their will to receive for ourselves alone, they will blaspheme also against the greatness of Moses. They won't believe in the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, or if you're looking at it as inside ourselves, in the greatness of the power of faith. So how can Moses help? How can he get them out from under the influence of this dreadful klipa? And that was why God sent him 3 signs. That Moses should show them to the children of Israel. And God told Moses how to organize them, one after the other, And God promised him that he would help him from heaven, that this would be sufficient, okay, to show them. And after that, the children of Israel would accept from Moshe Rabbeinu because of these signs, and they would be able to listen to Moses. And then he will be able to redeem them from this bitter exile. Okay, well, we're running out of time here. So I'll just do the first one quickly. Have we got time? I'll explain it to you quick, okay? Do you remember the first sign was you've got the rod, okay, the staff of Moses, and when Aaron casts it onto the ground, or when God tells him at the burning bush to cast it onto the ground, what happens? It changes into a snake which chases him, okay? And then God tells Moses, don't be afraid, pick up the snake, okay? And he picks it up. And how does he pick it up? He picks it up by his tail, okay? Now, if you're going to catch a snake, that's not a sensible, in physical, I mean, in reality, that's not a sensible place where to catch the snake, because if you catch the snake by his tail, it'll simply wiggle around and bite you, all right? So that's not a good idea. But what does it mean? The snake is the desire to explain everything in the world and within us through rationality, okay? Through knowledge, technology, rationality. That's the snake. That's the ultimate of the will to receive for itself alone. And what is this? What is this? The staff? Okay, it's mata b'chashivut. It's the faith which he's got in his hand. Okay, all right. So what happens when it gets thrown on the ground? It turns into this snake. Okay, so what you're doing, you're saying, I don't believe in faith. I'm not using faith. You throw it onto the ground, and it turns into an active will to receive oneself alone, which chases you. All right. That's what the problem with the snake is. But what's Moses told to do when he picks it up? He doesn't pick it up by his head, as you would expect, because he's not going to use the head. He's not going to use knowledge to defeat this thing with. Knowledge against knowledge isn't going to work. Okay. What does he do? He picks up by his tail. What's the tail? The tail symbolizes faith. Okay. Why does the tail symbolize faith? It's because it's something that we don't rate highly. We should, but we don't, okay? Our ego doesn't let us. Our ego prefers knowledge and technology and stuff like that. But the faith is actually what vanquishes the Pharaoh. So what Moses does, you see, he casts his rod on the ground, turns into a snake, and he picks it up by his tail, okay? And that actually is a symbol to the children of Israel, that his way, the way of faith, is able to overcome the wicked Pharaoh and bring the tidings of redemption. Okay. Well, we haven't got time to go into the second sign right now and how these two signs differ, but that should give us a very good introduction, Bezrat Hashem, on the whole concept of slavery and the inner slavery and where it comes from. Okay.
Yedida.
Yes.
So you're saying that the children of Israel understood all of this symbolism.
Oh, yeah. I think they did.
How did they get educated in that?
Well, I think they didn't need to be educated in that. I think what happens is that the vessels incarnate from the purest vessels down. Okay. So Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov were extremely pure vessels. So they didn't actually have to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. They naturally kept the Torah because their vessels were so pure. And although you can say, well, the children of Israel got into exile, so maybe they weren't so pure, you're still talking about extremely, extremely pure vessels, okay? And they call this generation, the generation that came out of Egypt, they call it Dor Deah, the generation that knew God directly. And there was not any other single generation that would ever match that generation. So although I know that, you know, as we look at the whole generation that's their, you know, adventures as they come out of Egypt and the number of times they provoked God and the number of times, you know, they drove Moses completely out of his mind. Nevertheless, we actually don't understand the nature of these adventures that they had, and they were in fact steps for coming closer to God. All right, each one of them. All right, so this really was the issue. Okay, that they were very, very, very pure, and I think they did understand it. They understood it. They weren't able to do anything about it, but they understood the significance. Yeah, when Moses showed them the signs, they understood it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Any other questions? No? Everybody okay then? Wonderful. Thank you for joining me. Lovely. Have a great Shabbat, everybody.
Shabbat shalom, Yadira.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Bye then. You're welcome. Bye then.
I'll be there on Monday.
Wow, really?
Zrat Hashem, yeah.
This Monday in Sfat?
I'll be in Israel Monday, but I'll be in Sfat on Wednesday.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, marvelous.
So
Okay.
no
Wonderful.
pressure, but if you happen to be around, you're welcome to join our group with our little journey. I'm gonna at least take them through, leave notes.
Wonderful.
So I'll let you know, it'll probably be midday, early-ish type of thing. I know you might be busy, and that's fine.
I'm not sure if I'll even be. I've got to go. I might have to go to Jerusalem. I'm not certain what's happening this next week.
That's okay. I'll keep you posted on our whereabouts. I'll send you our itinerary, and you can if it
wonderful.
crosses paths at all.
Oh, fantastic.
And then I've already made arrangements in March to come back and do leave note. I'll stay there. I'll be in Spot for at least a week after my trip.
Yeah. So I don't see you this time. I'll see you in March.
Nachon, mamash, yeah. You're welcome to stop the recording too. I didn't mean to hijack your.
Fantastic. Wonderful. I'm so happy for you.